Hi there. Welcome to the EPRC podcast. We are so excited to be here with the incredibly talented and lovely Dr. Martin Huecker. He's an associate professor and research director in the Department of Emergency Medicine at the University of Louisville. He's also the co-editor-in-chief of the free open access Journal of Wellness, which is amazing, and a member of the Emergent Phenomenology Research Consortium, the EPRC. So thank you so much for being here, Martin. It's just wonderful having you as a member and just so interested in your research and work. And I was just wondering, to start, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into the field of emergency medicine?
Sure. Yeah. So thank you for having me. This is great. So I'm born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky, and started to think about engineering, ended up choosing medicine. During med school, I got in with an ophthalmology doctor who kind of became my mentor and initially matched in ophthalmology eye surgery. But then during my intern year after school, I started loving working in the ICU and just randomly was in the ER for 8 shifts that year, all in 1 month or in a 2-week span, and just fell in love with emergency medicine. And so I gave up my spot in eye surgery and 6 months later or so switched into the ER residency and finished training actually a little more than 10 years ago now.
Oh, that's incredible. So much work goes into it. What do you think drew you to it the most? Is it like the energy of it, or what do you think really brought you to it?
I think looking back now and knowing myself better in 10 years, probably the breadth of the medicine, because I'd chosen ophthalmology because it was challenging and, you do surgery and all of that was very cool, but it was so focused on just the eyeball, and you can even do subspecialties within ophthalmology. So I think EM appealed to me because I could open any journal, any textbook, any news story about medicine, and it would be relevant for me. So I think my intellectual curiosity, just loving to learn about everything about the whole world. In EM, I can learn anything in medicine, and it relates to my job. So.
Oh, that is so perfect. I think last time we talked, I had mentioned that's exactly what it felt like with my PhD, where everything had to be so narrow. You'd have this like very narrow topic, like romantic era literature with Mary Shelley's short stories or something.
Yeah.
And I loved that research, but when I got excited was when you got to get into the interdisciplinary part of it and looking at how it
Yes.
relates to, medicine and science and psychology and all of that. And that's really, everything is so interconnected. So yeah, that makes sense, eh?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And also that makes me think of, like the EPRC itself and how it's this like group of multidisciplinary researchers and how key that is. I might have mentioned EPRC member Bree Benjamin last time. She has the Vermont Center for Integrative Health. And that also makes me think of, again, just these interdisciplinary approaches to healing and mental health, which is so important. So is that sort of how you approach healthcare itself too? So you have these broad interests, but do you kind of approach it from interdisciplinary perspectives as well?
I would say certainly in emergency medicine, for the first 10 years, I try to, because, you get focused on the one problem, the patient comes in with this symptom, but you can't ignore all of the other organ systems or what's going on in their life and all the things that led up to this point. But then what I've been practicing is we call lifestyle medicine or integrative medicine for a year and a half now. And in that respect, completely, we have a comprehensive integrative approach where what you eat affects your mood and affects your relationships. And so, this Western idea of splitting everything into these silos, it's just not how the human body and how our lives work. I
Yeah.
try to bring it back to emergency medicine as well. And of course, in the lifestyle medicine too.
Yeah, so true, so true. Yeah, just the microbiome too, that idea that like the gut is like a little brain or something, right? And how connected all of those things are and what you eat to how stressed you are and to depression and yeah, it's so interesting. And are you also you've done work, I know, like the Journal of Wellness. There have been articles on meditation for emergency medicine students. Is that something you look into as well?
Sure. I mean, so I first learned about it through a short course, kind of like a mindfulness-based stress reduction sort of course at U of L with some faculty members. And then like students came into those courses, residents sometimes. We've accepted papers from various other universities doing the same kind of thing. I mean, it's just it's it's almost become cliche, like yoga and meditation. That's how you cure burnout. And so
Yeah.
there is that part of it where it needs to be part of a, again, integrative or more comprehensive approach to help your healthcare workers and students thrive. But yeah, it's definitely something that's hit medicine, all over the place.
Yeah. So do you have a practice yourself? Like, do you meditate yourself?
I don't do it enough. I tell my patients the quote all the time that if everyone should meditate 10 minutes a day, and if you don't have 10 minutes, then you need 20.
Yes.
I don't know where I first
Yes.
saw that, but so I'm that kind of person, I think now, and
Yeah.
not taking my own advice. But I do honestly, like I feel like I'd kind of do more meditative approach to some activities like, jogging or walking or sitting out in nature and stop in the middle of the trail run and just look around and take it all in, little plateau
Yeah.
experiences like that. So, but my actual like meditate, like 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, like sitting in a room, being real disciplined about it. I've been
Yeah.
slacking lately for sure. Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard when you're in the line of work you're in too. But I think I love that what you said too, though, about just being able to bring the idea of like meditation into everyday life, where yeah, you're noting things and paying attention. Just the idea of attention and be able to like focus in and yeah, just not get caught up in all the thoughts and craziness of the day. So I think that's so perfect. I'm similar to you with meditation, trying to get better. But I recently had I don't know if you've met Ruben Weiss yet, but he's one of the board members for Emergent Benefactors, which is the charity that supports the research of the EPRC.
Right.
So he recently came and did a meditation with my romantic poetry class, and talked about it, yeah, in relation to like revolution perception and how, yeah, it allows us to shift our thinking. And it was really interesting. So I remember reading articles through your Journal of Wellness on meditation practice for specifically medicine students, but yeah, just in general, it's such an amazing practice. And also wanted to ask you as well, talking about meditation, which is such an important subject of the EPRC research, is sort of how did you get involved in the EPRC, and how do you think your work aligns, that sort of thing?
So getting involved, all is through Dan Ingram. So he was a graduate of our program, and I had only heard legendary stories about him. I had not met him. In fact, didn't meet him in person until just a few months ago. We had
Oh,
done
no
all
way.
this over Zoom and everything. But so he trained in our program. He, I think, reached out to Dan Danzel, who was our chair for many years, and but he was the chair when both of us went through training. And so he just reached out, explained all this to me, and he was so passionate about it. And I was like, well, I'm kind of a research guy, and I'm into this stuff anyway. So yeah, let's see what we can do.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I love the connections and collaborative aspect of it too. It's yeah, it's a really like exciting group of people, and yeah, Daniel's been doing such great work. I love that he's like a retired emergency physician, but also the meditation side of it too. So we're talking about like interdisciplinarity and including everything. And I think he's such a great example of that. So, and what have you found? Have you found it useful being part of the EPRC, connecting with other researchers, that sort of thing?
Yeah, we started out,
Yeah.
with a project that's still ongoing, but trying to. I think the reason he approached me is that he believes probably a lot of people have emergence and other phenomenon and
Yeah.
don't know what to do with it, and they might even end up in an ER or especially an emergency psychiatry sort of unit.
Exactly.
And so he's like, maybe we need to try to catch these people and give them better care potentially, and even go all the way up to the textbook level where we even teach and train emergency medicine doctors to know what to do, how to manage these people. No one really knows exactly how to help you out when something like that happens. So that was his initial approach. And we've done some interviews, just kind of qualitative study on people's experience with treating patients who may or may not have emergence that, as their complaint that brought them in. And so that's been really cool. That's been my main
Wow.
contribution so far is working
Yeah.
on that study, but of course open to other things in the future.
That's so important too. It's such a worry when people are having emergent experiences. So different effects that can arise from emergent practices such as meditation or the use of psychedelics, ecstatic dance, yoga. So all of these emergent practices that could potentially bring about emergent experiences, and the idea that they're often confused with mental health issues, when in fact there are much easier ways to help these people. So I think it's amazing that that you have that knowledge and there's going to be that extra support in the system. And also, speaking of the healthcare system, what do you think? Do you think that there's sort of the major problem facing emergency medicine today? Is there something you think you can pinpoint?
Yeah, so for there is something specific for emergency medicine. I do think with medicine in general,
Yeah.
this whole laser focus and subspecializing and really focus on sickness instead of on wellness and well-being is something
Yeah.
that plagues our approach to medicine in the West. But then for emergency medicine in particular, we have had a few reports lately on workforce issues. So that's something students are coming through. We're actually seeing less students apply to emergency medicine.
Mm.
We, residents are a little worried. Am I going to be able to get a job afterwards? And so we're almost seeing students who really are passionate about the specialty and aren't choosing their specialty just based on finances or what kind of job prospects they will have when they graduate. But it's definitely a concern that we may have an oversupply of ER docs in 2030. Whereas, in many decades past, we were always undersupplied. And so
Oh,
that's what something a lot of people are talking about now. We wrote a paper to try to look at that as a positive, the obstacle is the way sort of thing, on the scope of emergency medicine and how if some of these challenges are occurring with the workforce, then maybe, let's expand our scope. Let's get into
yeah.
wellness medicine, administration, teaching, research, all these different, pathways we can go to expand with our great skill set. And so, but that's kind of what the buzz is about lately in
Yeah.
emergency medicine circles. Yeah.
That's such a perfect way to go about it too. There's all this work on like the power of uncertainty, and in this like current moment, the neuroscience of it, how everything's up in the air, and we need to find a new way to approach things. So instead of just being in this state of fear and being paralyzed, instead embracing the uncertainty and embracing doubt and finding a new way to do things. So I think that's so perfect. You're kind of choosing as an opportunity to rethink the whole system and how it can be improved. So that's amazing. I'm really astounded by the work you do, and it's just such a pleasure to have you as part of the EPRC as well. I also am really curious about. Given your work, you must meet so many people on a daily basis, and whether there's an instance that really touched you or that transformed your life or shifted your perspective in some way, in like an interaction with a patient, for example.
One good example. So we treat a lot of patients with substance use, and that's a big focus of a lot of my research. And I interact with patients in the ER. This is their worst day. Often they have just overdosed, may have been resuscitated, revived from near death, and it's hard to really make a big connection with a patient. Find hope in how they can come out on the other side of such a thing. But recently, we did a research study with patients at a rehab center in Louisville, and it's a really great place where they will drive a van to your house and pick you up and make you come in to get to the group therapy. And so we did some focus groups on wellness in managing substance use disorder, rather than saying like stay clean, don't do the drugs, like focus on the sickness part. We asked a lot of questions about what makes you happy, where are you thriving in the physical realm and the mental realm, how are your relationships. I talked about finances, and so it was really eye opening to me to be able to have that connection with potential patients of mine who outside of the hospital, outside of the ER, and sit down in a room and just discuss these regular life issues that we all face, and to see how much they're going through, how just supremely hard it is for them to just pay the monthly electric bill, make transportation to get their therapy at the rehab facility, or to get their buprenorphine for medication assisted treatment. And so that has just helped increase the compassion we already try to maintain when we're working with patients in the ER at their lowest point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the community of it is so important. It's often so isolating, that addiction. And so the fact that you're able to bring people together and they're able to tell their stories, it really makes me think too of the value of like the medical humanities and yeah, and telling your story and sharing it and how that sort of empathetic sharing between like patient and doctor can be so transformative for, yeah, for both. Do you think there is like value in it? We've talked about this before. I'd love to do more work on it, but just the value of the humanities and medicine sort of intermingling.
Oh, I'm all about it. It's one
Yeah.
of probably my favorite or top two research projects we're doing now is on medical humanities, which we've shared some materials about. We have picked up some steam on it with a couple of great medical students and two of my residents, and we're coding a little over 1,000 articles that are essays written in EM journals because we publish a lot of science. It's X number of patients. Here's the treatment intervention. Does it work? But with this project, we're focusing on the essays that doctors write and submit, and you'll see them in most medical journals. And we picked our 4 EM journals that seem to publish the most of those, and just coding them for themes: positive, negative, talking about death, life, hope, burnout. And so, are they dialogues? Are they stories? Are they straight dry essay kind of thing? And so we are working really hard to code all that and try to present like what are the stories we tell to ourselves amongst ourselves in medicine and emergency medicine, and are they uplifting? What direction are they going? And so we're really pumped about that. Our abstract was accepted to one of our national conferences that's in May, so
Nice.
we will be able to present our data there, on what we're finding
Amazing.
out with this one.
I also was curious, slightly off topic, but related to the EPRC, whether you've had your own emergent experiences yourself or spiritual experiences, or whether that's something you're more interested in from a sort of medical perspective.
I mean, a little of both. I've
Hmm.
always been religious and spiritual to some degree, a Catholic.
Yeah.
Didn't really do all of the initiation rituals for Catholicism until like 8th grade. So I was a little older. I guess I understood it. I wasn't
Yeah.
just taking communion as a second grader, not really knowing what was going on. And so I've always just felt like there was something else. I would say, if anything, I'm a supernaturalist. Like I think that the materialist, way to look at the world and thinking anyone who thinks there's something beyond the atoms and energy in the universe, that I think they're missing out on something. So, I've always felt it intuitively that something like that's going on. And I've had many experiences over the years. I don't know how if they were earth shattering, but just I'd call them maybe more plateau experiences. Just,
Yeah.
I can remember one time running in the rain. I had like a injured ankle, went to Florida with a friend and just like disappeared and ran in the rain, and ankle stopped hurting, and just kind of like a spiritual experience. And so I've just felt like we can all sort of channel into whatever that is, that oneness, and feel that compassion and love for everyone. And so I've been lucky enough to have that happen to me several times, throughout life without any like dedicated 10-day silent retreat, intense approach to it. So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's so interesting experiences. Like lots of people mention running and being out in nature, how that brings them about as well. But yeah, and also like community. So you were mentioning the group that you're working with, and how working with people who are experiencing similar addictions, you sort of connect together just even on a physical level and like change your own brain behaviors as you're sharing these stories. And but also speaking about addiction, I know that that is one of the focuses of your work, and I was wondering if that's sort of you're doing work too on the current opioid epidemic as well, right? And just wondering why sort of how you think that we can address that as well. What's sort of some of the most important tools to address that at this moment?
Yeah, I think it's tough. I mean, we know certain things scientifically, like based on the evidence, that do work. One of those is using medications like buprenorphine,
Yeah.
treating opioid use disorder as a medical problem. Just like diabetes, you would offer the medication that works the best for a diabetic patient and hope that, and help them follow up, and maybe they slip up and their diet is not optimal and they forget to take their medicine, but we don't judge them and harshly and say you did this to yourself and
Mhm.
get out of my ER. And so approaching this, there are a lot of people now talking about addiction, the disease model of addiction, and sort of pushing back against that, which I like philosophically, that idea, maybe calling it more of a learning disorder. There are a bunch of authors throwing these terms around, but I don't like to say, well, now you have a disease and we'll have this for the rest of your life and we'll use pills to fix it. I think there's a role for using medication to help, but I'd rather think of it as something you could overcome, that you could, totally cure or at least go in remission. So I think that medication treatment is an important part of it. Multidisciplinary approaches with social workers, psychologists, compassionate doctors, psychiatrists, everybody working together as a team. Trying to get the supply off the streets. A lot of the legislation, is trying to limit prescribing of pills. Of course, trying to limit, how much heroin and fentanyl make it into the supply system as well. And those are all battles being fought, well outside of my realm of medicine and in the ER. But so those are some of the approaches that hopefully all kind of coalesce into, reduce deaths and improve quality for people.
And do you think like emergent practices have a role to play in it as well? So like yoga and meditation or breath work. I know that that's not a substitute for the medication that can be necessary, but do you think that those practices would be useful for people suffering from addiction?
Oh, totally. I mean, if you go back to William James, Carl Jung, Bill Wilson, who founded AA, many people believed back then, like, to find true remission of alcoholism, or to really cure your addiction, our spiritual experience was almost required. I think that's kind of what William James believed, or saw that the people who were most successful had something like that happen. So I think again, like Gabor Mate says, that, people with addiction basically always working on pain. Like, I don't ask, why they're addicted. I ask why the pain, I think, is something he says. And so, things like yoga and emergent things that can lead to emergent phenomena, and practices like meditation and just social connection with the opioid receptors that get activated when we connect socially. Those are all ways for us to cope with pain. That's part of being a human. And so if you learn these healthier techniques to cope with pain, maybe you don't turn to drugs in your teen years, and maybe it's a way to, move away from drug use, even in adult years, toward one of these healthier, forms of coping with pain.
So beautifully said and so true. Yeah, it makes me think of Russell Brand too, and yeah, just this idea of the addiction being caused by some need for something, or some like longing for connection, and how spirituality is connection, and how that is such a powerful tool, transformative tool in response to that. So yeah, thank you for sharing that too, Martin. Like it's I don't know, I'm really amazed by your different, like, you do have such a, I'm trying to think of the word, like a kind, calming presence. And I think that what you're doing, and with the different approaches to it, you're just helping so many people. So it's, it's just amazing getting to talk to you. Another thing that comes to mind as you're speaking so eloquently, is you wrote a piece called Stoicism Defeats Burnout. And I was wondering if you could say more about that, because I think it's really such an interesting title. I got to read it myself, but I would love to hear your thoughts on that, because I think that'd be really interesting to people listening.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's one of my favorite things I've written. Stoicism has become popular, almost popularized. And so, but it was neat. I was just looking at the three categories of burnout, which are emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and lack of professional fulfillment. And so those are your score, your burnout score. If you score highly, then you're burned out. And so I was reading about Stoicism, and various original sources, and a lot of the new stuff written about it, people like Ryan Holiday and William Irvine. And I'm like, wait a minute, these core virtues of Stoicism are exact treatments for these three categories of burnout. Has anyone ever written about this before? And there really was almost nothing in medical literature about Stoicism, period. Since then, I've seen a few more things. Even Journal of Wellness, we published an article that talked a lot about Stoicism by another author. So yeah, I was like, oh shoot, I want to write about this. This is pretty cool. And I've gotten a few compliments on it, and yeah, it's been a fun one.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, you're such a good writer too. That's what I meant to mention. And then speaking of writing, you have like Read behind you, and I know those are some of your favorite books. So I just wanted to mention last time we talked about this amazing book. If people haven't read it, When Breath Becomes Air, just a beautiful, heartbreaking book about being diagnosed with cancer and talking about knowing that as he was still in medicine and how he found that it was the connection between literature and reading and medicine that really brought him joy and was so important. So that was one book that we talked about. But I would love to know back there. Do you have a favorite one back there of your favorites?
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, Paul Kalanithi, that is that the one you held up
Yeah.
earlier? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. No,
exactly.
I have
So
read
yeah,
that, and I've said to many
that
people I
one.
probably will never read it again. It was just too
Yeah.
heartbreaking. But sometimes it's good to read heartbreaking things.
Yeah.
And then the last chapter that his wife wrote was just beautiful as well.
Yeah. So beautiful.
I mean, along those lines, of a recent book that did make it onto my shelf, on that topic of kind of bittersweetness, is the book Bittersweet, which I think I
Okay.
sent an email to you maybe, by Susan Cain, who wrote
Yeah.
Quiet about introversion. All that book I've given to a few people, read through it twice, watched her TED talk about it.
Hmm.
It kind of hits on a lot of these spiritual experiences we're talking about, like the
Yeah.
longing, the thinking something else is out there, C.S. Lewis sort of ideas.
Hmm.
And so I would put Bittersweet up there, very high on the
Yeah.
list. And then I have one right in front of me on organization. This book, I'm
Ooh.
gonna write a book review about it. Building a Second
Cool.
Brain. I'm gonna write a book review for our Louisville Medicine Journal, our local journal, because it has changed my approach to organizing all this stuff I read, and all the like, where did I read that?
Nice.
How can I find that? I want to share it to somebody. So that book is amazing. It's kind of one of those organization books that can be sort of dry and not a lot of heart to them, but this book's, I highly recommend it.
Okay, yeah, I'll recommend it to listeners and people watching as well. That sounds amazing. The other one I wanted to mention we've talked about too is that Mere Touch, which is all about this neurologist who has synesthesia, and he has mere touch synesthesia, which will always blow my mind, meaning that he can literally feel the pain of other people. So I was curious how you would sort of navigate that, like if you were in emergency medicine, but you could like physically feel the pain of others. How do you think that would how would that go for you?
Yeah, so I haven't read that yet, and I'm excited to. I do have it
Yeah.
on your recommendation, but oh gosh, I think that would be very tough to
Hmm.
do my job and really feel people's pain. You have to stay calm. You have to try to some degree to detach in the moment when you're managing a sick patient or talking to family. After the fact, you can let those emotions hit you and try to process through them. But oh gosh, I don't know if I could do my job if I were could empathize so directly with what my patients are going through, which is often horrible things.
Yeah, and given you already are such an empathetic person, so do you already find that a difficult thing to navigate with patients, just kind of empathizing too much almost?
Yeah, I bounce back and forth. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes maybe I don't empathize enough. I kind of think, what do I feel about what happened? Am I really letting myself feel how sad I should be after this thing that happened? And then,
Yeah.
just simply not getting animated and activated by things going on at work because I have to stay calm, and then coming home and someone falls down and is bleeding and has a cut, and my wife's like, what, you need to work, get more worked up over these things. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that's just kind of at work. I can't, no
Yeah,
matter how
right.
crazy it is, no matter what someone says, I have to just stay calm and even to keep the team together. And so yeah, it would, I want to engage those emotions at work and empathize with patients, but at the same time, in the moment, it's hard to be a really good doctor and do that.
Yeah, it wouldn't be useful if I were the doctor just crying alongside them. Yeah, that wouldn't help them at all, would
Right.
it?
Oh yeah, but sometimes
But
there's a role for that. My wife's an
yeah,
OBGYN, and she talks about sometimes crying with a patient, and
yeah,
there's many times where that's totally appropriate. It's just
yeah.
where I'm dealing with these high stress, moment to moment, things can change, and if you make the wrong decision, bad things can happen. It's hard to feel it right in that moment, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's a incredibly trying, but amazing job. And yeah, what would you say, like finding moments of joy in your job, maybe to, as one of the last questions, just to end it off then. So yeah, what about your job? And if so, for people wanting to get into emergency medicine, what is it that you love about it? And yeah, where are your moments of joy?
Well, the excitement part we kind of talked about earlier that
Yeah.
did draw me to some degree were the most exciting 15 minutes of every specialty. And so, you get to see all that breadth.
Hmm.
You get to see a lot of different things. And, for people with a short attention span, we have it all there for you. For my job in particular, I do love the academic side. I love that I work in the ER. I have complex clinical patients and enjoy the stimulation, but then outside of that, I have relationships with residents and students and my partners, and we write papers together and do research. And so I don't know if I could have a great career longevity in emergency medicine if I didn't have that academic side to things.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I highly recommend it. It doesn't mean you have to be a full-time faculty person. As long as you just get engaged with a teaching program around you, you can teach and have students come shadow you and give back to the community in that way. And so I think that those are huge sources of joy in my job, and just trying to build connections with patients, however short-lived, our time together. I think it's very beneficial to, again, focus on the positive and not just on all the things that could be going wrong.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, you are the person to have in the emergency room for sure. I would be happy to have you here. Well, thank you very much for talking to us on the podcast. It's again, such a pleasure to have you as part of the EPRC and just to know you in general. You're one of my favorite people.